at least from a technology standpoint, we're seeing a lot of centralization. The fact that state budgets are tight, people are trying to do more with less, and so we're seeing a lot in the areas of what I call the three new normals: mobility, cloud, and social media. Those are really where I think things are going in the future, and where I think states have to be ready for those things relating to business, of what their citizens need when it comes to mobility, going to the cloud for costs, for lowering costs overall, and social media, which is such a huge component to getting messages out to the citizens. I mean, there's a lot of different business components that go into social, not just for the state user workforce, but the end citizenry as well. And speaking from workforce, one of the trends that we see is the how hard it is to keep people in state government. And if states aren't up to par when it comes to things like mobility, the younger workforce is interested in going to work and having a mobile device, potentially having telework policies in place. So it's a younger kind of individual that's coming into state government, and state government needs to be ready to be able to recruit them and keep them by enabling things like social media, cloud, mobility. And the Commonwealth is doing a lot in those three areas to stay ahead of that what I call the three new normals. For instance, from a mobility standpoint, we've implemented mobile device management for all our state government users. So if somebody wants a mobile device, they need to use the enterprise solution. We're lucky enough that the Commonwealth is we have a very centralized infrastructure where we have about 85,000 users across the Commonwealth. We have a centralized email system. We have centralized identity and access management, employee onboarding, and we have centralized antivirus. So implementing centralized mobile device management is a natural progression in our maturity of the Commonwealth. So implementing mobile, not just for the Commonwealth user, but for the citizens. So what we've done, we've got mobile apps. A lot of applications are being developed for the end citizens as well. I think the biggest challenge is understanding your complete risk footprint. And especially for me, understanding, risk is such a dynamic thing. What we see as far as some of the positive trends, for instance, big data. Big data is a huge, couple of words that are talked about, but in security, there's a real good opportunity for big data when it comes to security analytics. And we collect a lot of different information from our firewalls, from our endpoint devices, from our antivirus, and we consolidate those into a view of events. But I think taking it a step further and understanding risk at any given point in time from a very dynamic viewpoint, using big data security analytics, whereas we can look at that data in real-time memory right away to know exactly what's happening on the network when, to take action at any given point in time. And that's from, an event standpoint. So using big data analytics from a security standpoint to get that view instantly of what you're looking at when it comes to risk. But on top of that, what I think is very important is governance, risk, and compliance. So we're implementing Enterprise GRC, which is going to give us that risk scorecard by not only using the big data, the analytics to feed that data in, but also doing assessments on agencies, across all agencies. So we have about 40 different agencies in the Commonwealth, and what I'm looking to establish is an enterprise scorecard. So we have an enterprise risk score, but then each agency also has their own risk score, so that we know, for instance, if an agency X has a lower risk score, what can they do from a risk standpoint, eliminating certain risks so that they can get a better score. And we're tying things into that, such as security awareness training, metrics, this sort of analytics data that we're going to be doing a pilot on shortly. And I'm also requiring this year for the first time that every agency, the NCSR survey, which is rolled out nationally, most of the time the state CISOs just fill that out. Well, I'm requiring all our agencies to fill out this cybersecurity survey to get a benchmark from a self-assessment standpoint of where the agencies think they are from a risk standpoint. And then as we go forward with this governance, risk, and compliance solution, when we feed this audit data, survey data, social engineering data, testing data, security awareness data, we can see what that risk score really is, to see what they thought they were, where they're actually at, and moving forward. So I think CISOs need to understand what their risk is, and enterprise governance, risk, and compliance. There's a lot of different solutions out there, and there's a lot of different ways it can be done, but I think it's very important for the CISO these days to understand what their risk is across the enterprise. So definitely enterprise GRC, as I spoke about, that's definitely one. Another one is data loss prevention. When I met here last year, I talked a little bit about the fact that I was interested in data loss prevention to enable things like cloud technologies. People want to use Dropbox. People want to use these different kind of Dropbox sites because they want to store their data there. And that's that cloud. It's enabling that cloud, that one of those new normals I talked about. Where I see enterprise data loss prevention coming in and why it's a high priority for us is not only to understand where your data leakage is from your users. So, is a user, sending Social Security card lists to their accounts, somewhere off-site? Those things have to be monitored. From a security standpoint, that's great. From a business standpoint, we can now enable things like a Dropbox type of a cloud site, because if a user wants to store data there, the enterprise DLP solution will essentially scan whatever it is they're putting up there, and if it sees things like Social Security numbers, it can stop it. That way we can say, you want to use things like a Dropbox type of a product, go for it. We're not going to block it, and we're just going to monitor what you're doing. And I think that's a way for security to enable the business, as opposed to saying, nope, we're just going to block it and not allow it. So DLP, I think, is a huge, it's definitely a big project for us this year, and we're going to be implementing that relatively soon. And because, once again, we have a centralized footprint with all our users, with centralized email, we're going to be able to roll this out now centralized for the entire enterprise, which I think is very exciting. Another thing that I think is extremely important that we're also spending a lot of emphasis on this year and as we go forward are cyber exercises. We've done, and I know we've participated with the federal government over the past several years in their cyber storm type of exercises, but as we've seen with federal funding running low, the states are now taking it upon themselves to really fend for themselves when it comes to cyber exercises. Where we see cyber exercises, at least going forward in the Commonwealth, is looking at it from a resilience standpoint. So, for instance, if sites are down for any given period of time, we want the agencies to be able to answer, how do you stay resilient? How do you continue to do business if those different IT systems that you were so used to using are under a cyber attack, and if they're no longer available? How do you stay in business? And whether that means that they do their business on paper and pencil or other means, we want them to start thinking about that, because as we all see, the trends in distributed denial of service attacks and different types of threats that we see out there are very, very sophisticated, and they're only getting worse and more sophisticated. So the cyber threat is huge. The trend is the threat landscape continues to change on a daily basis, and this other new normal where we see in the threat landscape when it comes to distributed denial of service attacks, that is just the sign of things to come. And we see these the different types of hacktivist groups that are out there. I mean, hacktivism was generally a term that really wasn't talked about 4 or 5 years ago, and that's really the new normal, where I think things are staying and going, and it's only going to get worse. So cyber exercises are extremely important. Commonwealth takes them very seriously, and we're looking at it. We want the businesses to be able to know their business and understand if and when there's a cyber event, how do they stay resilient and continue to do business.